Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out the conclusion of Squeaky's epilogue. I'm going to finish it off. Nevertheless, when a government converted a Pleasanton, California facility from a youth camp into an all-female prison, Lynn and Sandy requested a transfer. An hour east of San Francisco, Pleasanton was in the same state as Charles Manson. As authorities had found the woman to be model prisoners, the request was granted. They were joined another notorious inmate, Patricia Hearst. Lynn and Sandy, Hearst recalled, were as crazy as ever, free again to dress in their flowing robes and answering only to the names of Red and Blue. Lynn rapid assimilation to confinement, however, came to the end in March 79. While working in a prison garden, Lynn attached fellow inmate Julian Busick with a claw end of a hammer. According to witnesses, Lynn shouted that Busick was a white, middle-class, rich bitch and doesn't deserve to live. Imprisoned in connection with the 76 airline hijacking, Busick, a Croatian nationalist, recovered. According to a letter Lynn sent to the Associated Press, Busick was a rat. As Patricia Hearst's best friend and was very disrespectful to me. As punishment, Lynn was returned to the maximum security unit at Alderson. Sandra soon followed. In 1984, the People magazine correspondent visited Lynn. She was impressed by her knowledge of environmental issues and the nonplussed attitude she brought to life in prison. Only the occasional non sequitur reference to Charles Manson disturbed him about his subject. In a frightening way, he reported to his editors, spending time with Lynn was comparable to a wide-ranging, wonderfully intelligent conversations he had with his children when they grew up. Incidentally, the correspondent concluded, if Lynette Fromme ever gets out of into a rehabilitation program for the outside, I suggest that she make a dandy researcher for People magazine. Lynn became eligible to apply for parole in 1985, but never sought to release hearing. Soon afterward, Lynn did get out, but in terms unlikely to bring her employment as at People. At 9:30 p.m. on December 25th, 1987, she was reported missing from an Alderson prison. A national alert went out and the security was tightened for former President Ford. And the principals in the Fromme prosecution. Within hours, more than 100 federal, state, and local officers, some with bloodhounds, began combing the cold West State highlands. They would soon find no sign of the fugitive or clues or how she managed to escape. Despite sightings of Lynn being reported from far away as Minnesota, the jailbreak came to the anticlimactic end just 2 miles south of the penitentiary fence. On Christmas Day, a pair of prison employees driving down rural Creamery Road spotted Lynn walking out of the woods near a fishing camp. They pulled her over and Lynn, soaked wet from the rain, got in the car. She was dressed in 2 pairs of pants, a green overcoat, and a crocheted hat. Given the conditions, the nighttime temperature fell below 20 degrees. She was found to be in good shape. On McNeil Lehrer NewsHour, anchorman Jim Lehrer summed up the day's biggest stories. The celebration of Christmas by Christmas around the world and the recapture of Lynette Squeaky Fromme. Lynn's escape, which required her to scale an 8-foot-tall barbed-wire fence, apparently was motivated by the wish to see Manson one last time. Charlie had told his sympathizer that he was dying of testicular cancer. The sympathizer mentioned this to Lynn in a telephone call on December 23rd. It seemed I broke the news to her. As she was shocked, the sympathizer said, 90 minutes later, Lynn left the prison compound. Lynn attempted to plead no contest to escape charges, urging that fees to pay her attorney instead be given to a 4-H club or the West Virginia Soil Conservation Service for a tree planting program. Legally, I am guilty, Lynn told the federal court in Beckley, West Virginia. Morally and spiritually, I am not guilty. Prosecutors, however, refused to agree to the no contest plea, insisting instead on a full conviction of the unambiguous guilty plea. And while Judge Elizabeth Hallman granted Lynn requests to represent herself, she refused to redistribute defense attorneys' fees, requiring instead that Lynn have a standby counsel, just as in Jim McBride's courtroom. The trial was brief. Lynn recalled herself as the sole defense witness. I got word that Manson had cancer. He needed a relative, somebody to check on him, she told the jury. Manson, she said, was my husband, my brother, my father, my son, the man who'd been my friend. She had no choice but to escape, she testified, because my access to him is so limited. I've been feeling helpless for years. Lynn studiously followed the judge's instructions to testify via questions and answers. Seemingly to enjoy playing the role of questioner as well as witness, she said, Miss Fromme, you talk too much, and wait a minute, you're getting ahead of yourself. In summing up the case, though, Lynn was directing and addressing the jury. You don't have any choice, she said. I'm guilty as charged, legally and without remorse morally, so that's that. The jurors took 10 minutes to convict her. At sentencing, prosecutor Kirk Brandfass urged the stiff punishment. This defendant is not some kind of earth mother, trapezing through the woods with bluebirds on her shoulder. He said, this is a twisted follower of the twisted demonic murderer, Charles Manson. Lynn objected. Mr. Manson is not on trial here, she said. As evidence of Lynn's bad character, Brandfass contended, and she planned her escape on Christmas Eve so that the hundreds of law officers would have to spend the holiday searching for her. Lynn denied the charge. I was on the road wondering how to preserve the land, water, air, and wildlife, she said. It was so fulfilling that I truly did not know how many people were looking for me. Judge Holloman asked if Lynn might try to escape again. Well, yes, she said. It floats through my mind now and then. I wouldn't ever say that I wouldn't try it again. Nevertheless, Holloman imposed considerably less than the maximum sentence of 5 years and a $250,000 fine. Instead, the judge added 15 months to Lynn's life term and assessed a $400 fine. Lynn was transferred to a tougher prison at Lexington, Kentucky, and then to a new institution opening in the Florida panhandle town of Marianna, where she remains to this day. After Lynn's conviction on the Ford charge, the Sacramento Bee editorialized that there is a degree of damage which does not allow salvage. The brooding life of Lynette Fromme has surely reached that point. The trial was a nightmare of tension and apprehension, punctuated by the hysterical outbursts of a rebellious defendant and preserved by the potential of to attract violence. On the other hand, some thought Lynn's life sentence was hypocritical. In a letter to the New York Times, John Elo of Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, cited that the United States government's efforts to assassinate foreign leaders in a nation of official crime and legal corruption, a life sentence seems excessive for what was rather a momentary aberration of a premeditated malice. Claire Booth Luce, in an essay entitled The Significance of Squeaky Fromme, concluded that Lynette Fromme was the grotesque result of a society that had abandoned religious values for existentialism and its attendant moral relativism. Lynn had grown up in the country where values were turned on their head. The evidence was rioted in Berkeley for the Knights to use themselves. The four-letter words used in the novels were given to read in their English literature classes, were being seen as defenders of the First Amendment. The students were cut classes that bored them, only the demanding a relevant education. The lads who burned their draft cards and destroyed ROTC buildings were enlightened patriots. The lads and lassies had shacked up together in the dormitories. Again, rules they're discarding the obsolete tattoos of Puritanism and the latest vestiges of the Victorian sexual hypocrisy. Altogether, the youth rebels were creating a new morality and a new politics. In the words of the first boss, Condé Nast, who published Vogue, style percolates down. So do ideas. In the course of this century, aesthetic liberalism and the intellectuals prefer to call it humanism, and became the demonic philosophy of our educators. Its dregs are the ideas of the counterculture. As the Pierce appeared on the Wall Street Journal, reaction was intense. One reader complained that blaming the mad acts of Lynette, Squeaky, Fromme on Seder and Camus is like blaming Christ for the atrocities of the Crusades. Another reader, however, called Lucy's essay probably the most incisive, enlightened, and instructive article I have ever seen. Despite Lucy's effort to establish Lynn as an icon of an intellectual debate with social morale, she became a symbol of another sort. Several fringe characters took up Lynn's cause, threatening acts of terrorism as she was not released. In October 76, a man in his 20s was arrested on the West Coast after he sent letters threatening to kill President Ford. Governor Brown and members of the Women's Parole Board, if Lynn, Sandy, or Heather were not released. 4 years later, a 51-year-old Pennsylvania man tried to hijack an Atlanta-bound airliner demanding a flight to Cuba. A $5.4 million ransom and the release of Lynette Fromme and Sarah Jane Moore. He was arrested by the FBI and ordered to undergo psychiatric examination. In the broader popular culture, Squeaky Fromme secured a place as troubling footnote. Songwriters from Loudon Wainwright III to the Indigo Girls, Army Ray wrote lyrics in which Squeaky symbolized an ambitious kind of rebellion. If not for outright evil in the 1990s, she became a character in John Moran's modern opera, The Manson Family, commissioned by Lincoln Center and produced by the help of Philip Glass. Stephen Sondheim gave his Squeaky the signature duet in his 1991 musical Assassins, where he joined John Hinckley, who shot Ronald Reagan to sing Unworthy of Your Love. Since 1975, she had been mentioned thousands of times in books, newspapers, magazines, films, and television programs. In most instances, the name Squeaky Fromme is used as shorthand for a violence-prone kook. In 1994, Richard Hickerson went to Lynette Fromme at the Mariana prison. Hickerson had not communicated with Lynn since 1967 and made it clear in her letter that her interest had been sparked by the interviews she gave for her book. Lynn responded that the two began an intermittent correspondence that dealt with many issues, from the high school friends and the conditions of prison life. Back in 1967, Lynn wrote she would be expected both Rachel and herself to be mommies by now. Lynn remained an adamant defender of her actions and generally those of the Manson family, but did not dwell on the subject when talking to Rachel. She sent Rachel photos of herself in the jail and a National Geographic article about the ecological role played by bats. In Lynn's request, Rachel sent her a copy of Paul Krasner's autobiography, Confessions of a Raving, Unconfirmed Nut. She also asked for a book by Christopher Cerf on politically correct phrases. Different in Lynn's experience might have been from that the average American, she admitted she shared the national obsession of the moment, the O.J. Simpson saga. Lynn told Rachel that she watched the trial proceedings religiously and had quickly seized up the main players. She was disdainful of the Los Angeles District Attorney, Gil Garcetti. You already have sympathy for the victim, Lynn said, but Garcetti was a phony who makes you want him to lose. On the other hand, she was impressed by the first leader of the Simpson defense team, Robert Shapiro. Well, I disagree. And she called him the best lawyer that I have ever seen in a long time, and I really disagree. The Simpson case was mesmerizing, Lynn said, because it touched on so many issues, both personal and social. On the other hand, she reflected, it was just another trial. I found myself getting interested in this, and I thought, is my life that vacant? And partly Lynn said, it is. And I felt the same way when I watched the same damn trial. So that's the end of Squeaky, but we still have to go back and read a couple more chapters about President Ford and how she was actually able to subpoena the president to her trial. I do feel it's important, and I will be reading about it in the next few days. Think there's any truth or honesty to what's going on here, please like and subscribe and share, and have a nice day.